In this problem, we are asked to solve this binomial by factoring. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to move all the terms we have to the left-hand side of the equation. So that would give us 5x to the fourth minus 80x squared is equal to 0. In order for us to factor this, the first thing whenever you're factoring is finding the greatest common factor. So notice that right here, my greatest common factor is each term contains a 5, and each of these terms contains an x squared. So my greatest common factor here is 5x squared. So if I were to divide 5x to the fourth by 5x squared, I would have left x squared. 80 divided by 5 gives you 16. X squared goes away and then equals to 0. So now here, using the 0 property, in order for this equation to be true, either this factor has to equal to 0 or this factor has to equal to 0. So I would set each factor equal to 0, and I would solve for my x values. So here in this one, I'm going to divide both sides by 5. So that gives you x squared is equal to 0. Take the square root of both sides, gives you x is equal to 0. So x is equal to 0 is one of the solutions. Now I move on to the next equation. I add 16 to both sides, so x squared is equal to 16. I take the square root of both sides, so x is equal to, remember the square root gives you positive and negative numbers, so plus or minus 4. So here I would say that x equals 0, x is equal to 4, and x is equal to negative 4 are my solutions for this equation. Now another way of factoring, or what we call is grouping, whenever you have an equation where the power is not, the highest power of the equation is not 2, there's another technique where we can use the method called grouping. And the way we use that is we look at the first two terms of the equation. So I have x cubed plus x squared. And I factor out from these two terms the greatest common factor, which here happens to be x squared. So x cubed divided by x squared gives you x. X squared divided by x squared gives you plus 1. So now after I obtain that, I need to look at my other two terms, which is negative 9x minus 9. And I need to factor out a greatest common factor, which here happens to be negative 9. So negative 9x divided by negative 9 gives you x. Negative 9 divided by negative 9 gives you 1. So notice right here, in order for this method to work, both of these factors have to be identical. If they are not the same, then this method does not work. So after I obtain this equation, now what I'm going to do is I have this term, which is x squared times x plus 1, and I have minus 9x plus 1. So here, whenever you have, for instance, 2x squared plus 2x, notice that this could be rewritten as 2x times x plus 2x. So here, times 1, here I have a 2x and a 2x that is being multiplied for every term. So I can factor out this 2x, and then you have x plus 1. So I'm going to use the same method right here. Since here I have x plus 1 and x plus 1 being multiplied by each of these terms, I can factor out an x plus 1 from each of these terms. So when I factor out an x plus 1 from this first term right here, I would have x squared left. Now the minus goes down. Now the same thing, when I factor out an x plus 1 from this term, I would have the 9 left equal to 0. Now I have two factors. Using the 0 property, I'm going to set this equal to 0, my first factor equal to 0, my second factor equal to 0, and now I'm going to solve for x. So I'm going to obtain x equals -1 as one solution from this factor. And here I'm going to solve for x. So adding 9 to both sides gives you x squared equals to 9. Square root both sides gives you x is equal to plus or minus 3. So now my solution for this binomial is x equals -1, x equals 3, x equals -3.